We're rolling. This is Indecisive Cinema, episode 39. Carlos is not here today. I'm Jeremy Knight. That's the person that you know. But Carlos is doing something. I don't even remember what he's doing today. So I've brought in one of my good friends, Cody Boyer.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about 1917.
Yeah.
Cody, introduce yourself.
My name's Cody Boyer. I really like movies.
He likes movies, guys. That's awesome. Yeah. The two of you listening, whoever to this podcast. It's like we're trying to keep it professional here, but ultimately, you know, it's just a discussion with two dudes like movies.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, I suppose. But anyway, what do you do, by the way? Like, we give people some context for.
I'm a college kid, going to college. I'm, a young, 27-year-old college kid. Who,
hey, you're doing it. It's all that matters.
He's trying to get his life on track.
Yeah, and you are. What else do you do?
I work at a liquor store. I play.
Oh, the power just went out.
Basketball.
Well, I guess we can still record in the dark.
Yeah.
Oh, battery backups are gonna beep though. Let me turn the battery backups off real quick. We gotta pause this. So I mean, we just like all the power just surged. I don't know what the hell's going on. We're at the office. It's a Sunday, which is normally when we record, but we're recording in a new office, and in this current office that we're in, they don't turn the air conditioning on Saturday and Sunday, which is just atrocious and awful.
Do they do it during the week?
It's on during the week, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But we can't control it. We can't control the thermostat. We've asked them about that. It's like, there's any way we can just like lower it a little bit? We got a lot of computers in here, and it's hot as hell. So, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And we just sweat on the podcast days. But
what's the response whenever you ask them?
They were like, yeah, you can pay $45 an hour. Is that clicking? Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, I don't know what the hell that was. The battery backups for all our computers are clicking, so I had to restart. We're turning the fan up again, and we're pretty much back to business. I don't know what just happened, but this is what it is. This is a shit show already.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, let's get into it. Where were we? What were we talking about?
I was boring everybody with my life.
Yeah. Well,
let's
get back to that then.
College basketball. No, I don't play in college basketball.
He runs an amateur basketball league every Tuesday and Thursday. Go ahead, pitch your basketball.
Well, if anybody's at the courts and walks up and asks if we want to play with them, we tell them no.
So you have to let us know in advance, otherwise you're not invited to play.
You have to be at a certain criteria of skill that's very low.
Yeah.
Or else we'll be scared of you.
So we play basketball. What's the park we play at?
Centennial
Park in Pearland. So if any of you guys, two people listening, want to play some basketball on Tuesday and Thursday, like evenings at like 8:30, 9 p.m.
Hey, you have over 500 listens, so
yeah,
we might have 500 people show up at one time.
Most of those are probably myself and Carlos. Let's be real. No, I only listen to podcasts once. I always have to just double check and just make sure that the content's not horrendous, and hopefully improve the show. But if you look up like the top 5 tips of running a podcast, the very first one is, listen to it. So, but I don't listen to it 14 times. I don't want to listen to myself 14 times. So we somehow got 500 listens to just me, but yeah, it's only 500 over the course of like a year and a half.
That's good numbers. That's great numbers.
Sure, yeah. I mean, but hey, we're not doing it for that, ultimately, so who cares? Yeah. But anyway, I think we've properly introduced Cody. We have some perspective. He's a college student. Mm-hmm. He runs a basketball league, which is like the last thing you'd expect from Cody Boyer if you met him. Like,
I run it because I have the basketball.
I wouldn't say and this is a compliment, you don't look like an athlete.
No.
I mean that as a compliment. You look like a musician. Like if for those that don't know what you look like, because we're just listening to the podcast, like he's got a scruffy beard. He's got, glasses, hair combed over.
Yeah.
I don't know what else.
I shouldn't be playing basketball. I'm pretty sure I broke my nose a couple weeks ago.
Do you think you actually broke your nose?
Look at it. It's like,
oh, it's crooked.
Right?
Yeah, you need to go see a doctor. Holy shit!
It's already been 2 weeks. It's
over.
Yeah, I'll just live with it.
Trey, who's supposed to be on our podcast today, I don't know where he is. He just didn't want to wake up, probably.
No, I can't even get him out of the house at like 2.
That's fair. I mean, we should just call this, the sleepy Cinema because it's just us. Every week I'm exhausted because I shot a wedding till 11:30 in Conroe last night. So
Yeah.
and then somehow for some reason decided to wake up at 8:30 and record a podcast. But Cody was even like, can we do it later? 10 o'clock's a little early for a Sunday. It's like he's not wrong.
I normally get up
here we
at
are.
1, maybe 2.
I mean, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Just living life.
But it's kind of nice being up early. There's not a lot of people out.
Yeah, it is. It was
Everybody's
easy
at
getting
church.
here. It's super foggy. Other than the church people,
Yeah.
they're a specific breed.
Yeah. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm
Props
not
to them.
judging. Do whatever you want. But yeah.
It's,
But it was easy getting here. So anyway, we're just rambling.
yeah.
so I guess I'll explain the format. So that we've kind of adjusted the format for the show. Normally we just talk about whatever movies we've seen, but I want to do this every week, and so we've decided to kind of highlight specific films to talk about and just discuss, and that allows us to bring anybody on the show. So when Carlos isn't available, I can bring Cody or Trey or whoever in, like we did with Marissa last week. So this is completely spoiler filled. So there's no spoiler free. This is just, we're going to break down the movie just by plot. So there will be spoilers. If you haven't seen 1917, turn this off and go see it if you can, especially in the theater if you can.
Mm-hmm.
I think both Cody and I are in agreement that it's pretty fucking outstanding.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, so ultimately that's the format of the show is just we're just going to break it down and analyze it by, the different like plot details and stuff like that. So I guess we'll get into it. So I have the synopsis written down. It's kind of a long one. I don't know that I really, you know what? I'm not going to read the synopsis. I'll read the names though. So they're the very beginning of it. It takes place on April 6th, 1917, obviously in the title, on a battlefield in northern France. Lance Corporal Tom Blank in the British Army is asked to choose one of his battalion colleagues to join him on assignment. And they go to the general, and the general basically assigns them a mission to go and deliver a message to, and I don't understand the geography of this. And we talked about 1917 on the podcast like 3 weeks ago or something, or 3 episodes ago. And I don't know the true historical accuracy of this film.
Yeah.
I hear that there's some true elements to it, but I don't know if the whole movie is that way. I don't know. Do you know anything about that?
Well, the one thing I do know is that the director, Sam Mendes, he came up with the idea because his grandpa was a messenger in World War One.
Oh, okay.
So that's like where the kernel of the idea came from.
Gotcha.
And then I'm pretty sure what I've read is that he of course wrote most of it himself and then picked some actual events to utilize within the story.
Gotcha. Interesting. Because Sam Mendes, I mean, both of us are familiar with him, at least his work. I mean, he did American Beauty and Skyfall. Did he do all the new Bond films with? I forget. He did at least Skyfall and Spectre, I think. But
I don't think he did all of them.
Casino Royale, I think, was somebody else.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, Skyfall is one of my favorite Bond films. I mean, I think that's an incredible achievement. Roger Deakins shot that as well. So this is kind of a reunion between the two of them. I don't know what else he's done though in the meantime. Let me look up his filmography. But I mean, he's a great director for sure. He's definitely. I mean, American Beauty is one of those movies that, I mean, unfortunately, Kevin Spacey has been canceled for good reason. But ultimately, I think that was a movie that changed the way I watch movies. So Sam Mendes is definitely an accomplished filmmaker, and this is just an outstanding addition to that filmography. He also did Road to Perdition.
Okay, that was pretty good.
Revolutionary Road, which is okay, but it's still pretty critically acclaimed. Jarhead, which is also Roger Deakins.
Jarhead. I think
Roger Deakins shot Road to Perdition as well.
Before 1917, Jarhead might have been my favorite war movie.
I mean, Jarhead's pretty outstanding, and it looks amazing.
It's not about what a regular war movie would be.
Sure.
It's
a
the
little bit more
emotional and mental impact on the soldiers.
Yeah, and Gyllenhaal's pretty damn good in it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Sam Mendes is outstanding, and ultimately, so he wrote and directed this film. I think it was just him as a writer. Let me see who's credited. Sam Mendes and one other. So Christy Wilson Carnes.
Yeah.
Who does she wrote Penny Dreadful, or at least some episodes of it. Or she's actually the head writer, I think. for Penny Dreadful, which apparently is pretty good. I haven't seen it. I think it's on Showtime.
I've heard good things about it.
But yeah, so I mean, ultimately, I guess we've kind of at least discussed the general plot elements of the film before we break it down and get into it. So I guess let's talk about like the way that the story's structured, because it's very different from like a traditional war film like Saving Private Ryan or something like that. Yeah. The setup for this film is very similar to something like Saving Private Ryan. You know, you've got two soldiers that get assigned a mission, or in Saving Private Ryan, you know, it's just immediately it opens with D-Day, and they're like the task is very immediate. You know,
it jumps right into it,
and that's how this is too. And you know, I guess at this point, it's worth noting that it's all kind of done in one shot. You know, or at least that's the idea or the gimmick, which I think it's utilized really well. That's one thing that I had talked about.
I think it's like a lot of people were saying that he just did it to be able to say, "Oh, it's a one-cut movie" kind of thing, or like one long take. But I think it works well because I remember watching a video where he talked about how he wanted to stay with the soldiers for the majority
100%.
of the time, like same, like real time kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like a day in the life of.
Yeah.
And it opens with him waking up, like leaning against a tree. It actually closes with that too, which is interesting. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. But it opens with, let me pull up his name, the person that we think is the lead, who ends up not being the lead. And that's what's interesting about the structure of this film is the main character is the younger soldier. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it does open on.
It opens on Schofield.
Guy. Schofield is his name? Okay.
Yeah, because Blake
is the younger one.
Blake is like lying on the ground behind him, but it's like positioned on Schofield.
Gotcha. Maybe I had some preconceived kind of notions, like when I went into the film, because the trailer is more focused on him.
Yeah.
So I thought he was the lead.
His brother, and
Exactly right. But yeah, so Schofield is definitely the lead by the end of the film, no question. But I definitely think the movie kind of tricks you into thinking that, because the way it's constructed, even like going in thinking that it's about that kid, I think the movie's still very much focused on the kid for the first half until he dies, right?
Yeah,
and that's what makes that moment really surprising and really unexpected, and also really effective in the way that like just you lose your own buddy in war, you know. That's a fucking heartbreaking moment in that film. But yeah, it's like, so, I mean, tell me a little bit just about like just go through like the order of events in the film for me real quick, and just let's lay out like the actual overall structure and the way because I think it's very different from like a Saving Private Ryan in terms of, especially what I just described, like it being kind of, it's almost two halves of a movie. The first half is the two of them together, and the second half is him figuring it out on his own, basically. And that's very different from, it still has a 3-act structure, I think. But I mean, I couldn't even tell you where it feels more like two halves than 3 parts, but I'm not 100% sure.
It's like two halves specifically to him.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like the whole story.
Sure.
But it's like him being hesitant to go on this mission, and then after he dies, like
he's even frustrated about it.
Yeah, and then after Blake dies, he kind of feels like he's 100% ready to do this.
Sure.
Because you notice him in the truck right after Blake dies.
Which is an amazing scene.
Yeah.
That says so much with no words.
He's just like sitting there focused and, you know, mourning, of course, because his friend just died. But also, like, when the truck gets stuck, he's like, everybody's kind of just like, and he's like, get the fucking, get the truck moving.
He snaps out of it and, you know, to some degree kind of realizes that he's being selfish, you know, he just gets out of the truck and starts going, this isn't about me. Yeah. You know what I mean? Which is an unbelievable moment in that film. That's also a transition point for that character in a way that's really interesting. Yeah. That's one of my favorite scenes in the film, actually, just emotionally, I think. There's a lot of terrific emotional scenes in that movie, but that's one in particular that's really interesting. Yeah. Because the idea that, like, he's sitting in this truck and he can't mourn his friend the same way, because there's all these other guys that are just like, yeah, man, we lost 10 people in our you know, battalion or whatever.
Yeah, it's just this tiny little blip in this giant war.
And that's what's so interesting about it, is it's telling this like really personal story, but the scope of it is really large, and that particular moment of like personal grief is handled so much. I mean, it says a lot for the way that like war impacts psychology and all that stuff, and just, I don't know, it's interesting. Yeah, because you can't grieve like in a normal way, like you could here, you know. No. And like something like that, losing a friend in that manner, just like which is such an unexpected moment again, is, I don't know, it's really interesting. But yeah, it's definitely it is. That's an interesting way to put it, though. That it's like it's two halves for him, but it's not necessarily the story structure isn't necessarily, like the overall story arc of the character isn't necessarily in two halves.
Yeah.
The other moment though that I wanted for you to clarify for me, which I think is kind of the end of the second act, which climaxes with that just amazing night sequence. I think again, we're working through the plot structure of the film, but there's that scene with the child. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we realize at the end of the film that he has a daughter, a wife and daughter. Yeah. So there's that scene though there, and I guess remind me of what happens in that scene and how, because he walks in on her. She's scared because all the
right before that though, there's a great scene that leads to that where he sees a soldier silhouette and he starts walking towards it because he's unsure if it's like a friend or foe.
And they start running at each other.
And then he just picks his gun up and he starts running. He kicks the thing in, jumps in. The girl is afraid that he's just gonna kill her or like pull her out of her little hiding space.
Sure.
And then she realizes that he's hurt. She starts helping him, and then there's a baby involved. But the baby isn't even hers.
Oh, interesting.
So the baby she just found and is trying to take care of, and that's why she says we need milk because she can't breastfeed because she wasn't pregnant. And so he actually, in that moment, remembers, oh yeah, I found that cow milk at the farm.
Yeah.
And is able to give that to her.
Okay. Interesting. It's an interesting scene that like you almost forget about because so much happens in this film.
Yeah. It's like a little moment of really like tender innocence. Yeah.
But also it's telling, and I think the ending is to some degree kind of a big reveal that we figured out why he's doing all this and why he wants to go home, and
he just wants to like finish his mission. And
what's crazy though is like he's his mission's not over. He's still in a war.
Yeah.
That's the unfortunate part is like even this is just one day in his life, and he might sleep for 3 days, but
Ben Mendelsohn, is that his name? Ben Mendelsohn?
Mendelsohn's from Outsiders. That's Ben Mendelsohn.
Oh,
he's the detective in Outsiders.
Who's the guy at the end? I always forget his name.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, Cumberbatch. The phrase that he says where he's like, "You're giving me this letter now. A week later, the general's going to send a letter that says attack at dawn." And it's like every day is just going to be the same thing over and over. Like basically telling Schofield that he didn't really
accomplish much. Dang, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, but then the other dude is like, "Thank you for your hard work."
Sure.
And it's kind of like this. It really doesn't matter, and everything that he just went through doesn't matter. And
he lost his friend over it, and man, I didn't take the ending as that bleak, but it kind of is.
It really is, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so we're working through some of it.
I guess we could go back to the beginning structurally.
Well, let's go back to the characters. I think that's a good place to start. So you've got the two lead characters, and I think they're both very interesting characters for their motivations for what they're doing. So like you have the let's talk about Corporal Blake first in particular. So you've got this kid who's clearly determined, but that's I don't know. I think it opens with him kind of like not wanting to do whatever it is that they ask him to.
He's kind of like, so the way I see them too is that Blake is inexperienced because they have a conversation at one point where Blake's asking Schofield about Somme, which is like one of the major battles in World War One. Mm-hmm. So it looks like Schofield has had to go through some like chaotic warfare.
Interesting. That
Blake hasn't really experienced yet, and that's why Blake's a little more like headstrong. Of course, it's his brother, so of course he's going to be like, we need to do this, we need to do this.
He's super confident,
but he doesn't understand why Schofield's so hesitant, because Schofield, like, they even talk about him winning a medal, and Schofield just like traded it for like some bread or something, because he has lost any idealism about like fighting in the war.
Interesting. That's all stuff that I didn't even pick up on.
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense though. But I saw the movie 2 weeks ago though. So 3 weeks ago.
I saw it this past week. It's a little fresher.
That's awesome though. That's why you're here.
That's definitely the difference between the two characters, which works pretty well.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. He's literally trying to hold him up from sprinting through the tunnels in the first like 20 minutes of the film.
Yeah,
it's just the two of them kind of running and talking while they're running. through all these tunnels, and he's basically just like, man, this isn't like, I don't think you understand what you're doing. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, is what Schofield's saying to him, the whole time. Basically,
and Schofield's the one who notices the tripwire as well. So it's like
exactly,
you keep seeing all these examples of how Schofield's just a more experienced soldier because he had to go through more crap, and so he's got a little more under his belt.
Interesting. Like, you start breaking it down, and you realize just how good the script is.
Yeah, it's well built.
Yeah, it's really well designed.
Fully fleshed out.
Because all that stuff makes sense. Like, it's a dynamic that exists, but, like, I just didn't recognize it. I mean, ultimately, it's
tiny little things that, like, if you missed it, it's like it's a whole thing. That builds.
And it still works just on a level of, like, you know, they've got a mission and they're going to do just that, and they're overcoming obstacles.
Yeah.
But, like, when you start breaking down, again, and that's why we do this format, is hopefully to learn something about the movie. So you taught me something. And then, so I mean, that kind of breaks down, I think really well what these characters were motivated for. Now, like, so in a traditional story structure for a character, you've got the initial challenge for that character. So, like, the Corporal Blake character is, his challenge is that his brother might die, right? Or that's his motivation to motivate. The inciting incident is which happens in the first 5 minutes for that character is just somebody tells him, like, hey, you've got to do this or your brother's going to die, and that's interesting for that character specifically. What is the motivation for Schofield, though? At least at the beginning, I think you kind of went into that, but I guess it's just, well, I mean, I'll let you talk more on it.
Well, I mean, I would say he lacks motivation, really.
Interesting.
But I would say the one thing that it kind of feels like he feels like a bigger brother to Blake in the wartime.
Yeah.
So it's like he's like trying to slow him down at least. I don't think he's trying to. He's kind of telling him, like, "Are you sure we should do this?" And then once he realizes Blake is like set to do this, he's going to do it no matter what.
Yeah.
Schofield's like, "Okay, we need to think of this in a smart way.
In a logical way.
How can we do this like safely, in a clever way?
Yeah.
Or else we're not going to make it there."
And what's interesting is, like, so, I mean, because ultimately, the Blake character dies, so, like, his arc ends there, and so if you look at the movie as a whole and you look at the Schofield character, I mean, ultimately, he, by the end, essentially becomes, he gains that confidence and that strength that the Blake character, that fearlessness that the Blake character has. Yeah. Because even though he just is thrown into some of those situations, like, I don't know, it just, like, even, I think that the scene with the baby at the end was just such a pivotal scene in the film, and at least in its placement in the film. Traditionally, in that, like, point, it gives you a break for the character to kind of conceptualize everything that's happening to him, right? And that's what that scene is. And it's a great, like, I think Star Wars could use a scene. The most recent Star Wars film could use a scene like that. Have you seen?
Rise of Skywalker.
Whatever the hell it's called. I always forget the title. It's such a stupid name. I don't like. I like that movie. There's a lot of good stuff in it, but it's like you could use, like, that kind of a break for these characters to, like, just
because that one was like, I think it felt like
Game of Thrones final season.
Like constant onslaught. Quick little tidbit though. Somebody on Reddit posted a great idea. The first, like, Phantom Menace should actually be called Rise of Skywalker, and Rise of Skywalker should be called Phantom Menace. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point.
I love that.
But but anyway, I mean, just ultimately, that's what that film is, or that scene. Sorry, not the scene with the baby, though. Is just that it's allowing that character to take a step back from everything that's happening in a safer place. Yeah. I mean, Saving Private Ryan has these scenes where they're holed up in the church, and Tom Hanks is, like, talking about his hand shaking. It's a traditional story structure element, something that you'd see when you're writing a script. You would hopefully plan for those moments in your script where these characters kind of take a step back and they essentially externalize what they're thinking about. And that's a cheap way of doing it, but I don't think 1917 does that. It's like the scene in the truck, which is a quiet moment, but it tells us more about that character and where he's at than any other line of dialogue in the film. And there's no words spoken other than the characters around him. But I do think his arc, I think the arc of that character is that, he becomes stronger and more confident and fearless. Like, there's the final scene is essentially him sprinting without care for his own safety through the field, just completely, he could get blown up just like any of these guys. Yeah. It's an embodiment of what the Blake character kind of taught him about, he looked at that and he goes, these characters are contrast one another. And that's what's so interesting with the dynamic that you just described. But I don't know, like, I think that builds on that dynamic. And I think he learns from, I don't know what the Blake character was all about, his motivation for it. Like was entirely selfless.
It kind of like shook off the emotional trauma, mental trauma that Schofield probably had from fighting in previous battles.
Sure.
So like he became a lot more conservative with like where he wanted to put himself within a battlefield.
Safety was his like number one concern,
just
and then
getting home. And then he realized like, oh, there's a bigger picture here. Like there's people like the girl and the baby. I feel like not only reminded him of his wife and daughter, but also like giving him a chance to see that there are like just innocent civilians within all of this that he needs to be able to help.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of just caring about himself and trying to get home.
Interesting. So we just found that's a whole new meaning for that scene, which is and the ending, which is I think might be more hopeful than we were talking about. He looks at his mission as just like maybe that mission was for nothing, but ultimately, I think the shot of him looking at the letter is essentially, I think that's the meaning of this movie, or the end, or the thing that he figures out, I think is what you just described. I mean, and so like the ending ends with like, it's sunny and it's warm and he looks comfortable and he falls asleep on the tree looking at the shot of his daughter, I think, or his wife and daughter. Yeah. I think is how it closes out.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
And that's too hopeful of a tone for such a cynical concept, Yeah. And even after he like the general Benedict Cumberbatch, even after Benedict Cumberbatch tells him that it was all for nothing, right? He still goes and delivers the message of Blake to his brother. Yeah. That happens after. Yeah. And that was his mission. Ultimately, is to help his brother grieve, and know that he was okay, because that was what Blake wanted, is to know that his brother was safe and sound.
And also with Cumberbund, I don't think he's actually like a trustworthy person to give the right idea about, oh, well, this was all for nothing. I think he was just upset because he didn't get to finish his plan
because it's almost like a General Custer had somebody come and tell him to stop, and then he actually did, is basically what happens with the
Benedict. Because he realized like, oh yeah, we're all gonna die.
Yeah, because they keep talking about how aggressive that character's been.
Because Mark Strong earlier, the guy who finds him at the barn and like gets him onto the truck, he's like, make sure you have some witnesses because some men just want to fight, or something like that. Exactly. And he's like, so maybe Cumberbund, it really did matter what he did, and Cumberbund's just saying this because he's just like, well, I wanted to fight today. Yeah, that's all he really wanted.
Interesting.
And so he's trying to make him feel bad about it because he's the one who came with the letter to stop him.
Sure. Yeah, and so he's taking it out on him essentially, but then he also thanks him, because I think he realized. Yeah.
What does he say? I can't remember.
You said it earlier, though, that he basically says...
Well, no, there's a second, like the second in command. He like Schofield, like Cumberbund, basically, I can cuss, right?
Yeah, I've already cussed.
Cumberbund says, like, now fuck off, basically. I think he actually says that.
I think it was playful, though. I couldn't tell. To me, that scene came across as he was frustrated that somebody told him that he was wrong, right? Yeah. But then he comes to the conclusion that that's the right thing.
He is a little cheeky about it, but then as Schofield's walking out, his second in command is like sincerely like, thank you for your hard work and your sacrifice.
Yeah, and which is an interesting moment. Yeah. But I even think Benedict Cumberbatch, like just the way that his physicality in that scene feels like he's really thinking through, because initially he's frustrated and he's like, no, it doesn't make any sense.
Pissed,
but then I think he comes to the conclusion that this is the right thing to do, and he never considered that.
I'm pretty sure you're right. I think you're right. He does like thank him in a way, and he kind of like talks to him like man to man, kind of like, this is all just bullshit.
Exactly.
It's just fighting.
Which is interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't even think it's interesting. You have all these little characters that I think tell a lot about the story and about the world that they're in. Yeah. Which is why I think this is one of the great films of this year. A lot of
them are performed by these like huge A-list actors too.
Of course. Yeah, Mark Strong. Yeah. Like Benedict Cumberbatch. You've got Colin Firth as the general.
Yeah.
And all these actors bring something extra to that role.
Yeah.
Like in each they're just character actors in this film is all their role is,
Yeah.
day players essentially.
And I was looking at discussions online, and somebody brought that up, and they were like, it was actually a really great idea because the two main guys are kind of no name. Like Blake was actually had a part in Game of Thrones. He played Tommen.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's him. I forget about that.
I knew I recognized his face, and somebody mentioned it, but besides that,
older.
it's like he's older. They're both, and Schofield's like, I've never seen him before. So the main characters are no-name guys. They're just basic infantry in like a war.
Yep.
But then all of the higher-ups are like these A-list actors.
Sure.
Which fits perfectly with the idea that like those types of guys are seen as like gods or celebrities within an army.
Interesting. Never thought about it that way. Yeah. And they are, to some degree. I mean, it's just kind of how it works.
The soldiers almost think of them as like invincible whenever you have a guy like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Because I mean, Colin Firth, Benedict Cumberbatch, and Mark Strong's not as much of a household name, but he's definitely, like, you respect that. You know that guy.
Yeah,
like, from
you can recognize him.
As a character actor. But, Benedict Cumberbatch, who's also, you could call him a character actor, but I think that dude does everything. He's, again, like, he's a superhero.
Yeah, he's in the Marvel universe.
Exactly. And that's an interesting point. Yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah, so, I mean, it's... just on the character standpoint, this is definitely, there's a lot of interesting things happening that I never even considered, as far as that goes. Now let's talk about the craft a little bit. So there's two main things that I think we can break down, which is cinematography and directing. Obviously, cinematography is the biggest talking point. It won the best cinematography award at the Oscars this past week, which I think is the right choice. Although Parasite looks very fucking good too.
Yeah.
1917 is a technical achievement and one that like supports the story. It's not just so anyway. Everybody's all like riled up about the fact that like it's a one take gimmick. Like I've seen so many critics. Like people that watch movies that are angry about the fact that like they're marketing it as a one. Nobody's marketing this thing as a one shot film. Like if you look at all the trailers, that's the trailer ultimately is what the studio's marketing. Like it's not like Gemini Man where they're literally in the trailer talking about the frame rate of the movie. You know, it's not like now. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff because again. You have Roger Deakins, the greatest working cinematographer, one of the greats for sure, but I think the greatest. It's like there is a story of how they designed this film, and from a cinematographer's perspective, that I think is fair to highlight when you're releasing such a I don't know. It's just cynical to complain about the fact that they did this all in one take.
They're trying hard to make a great movie. I'm sorry.
And it's not just a gimmick, though. I think the way that the story, the way that each scene is shot, essentially, and it's again like Ryan Johnson tweeted this hilarious comment about the fact that like no, it's got Benedict Cumberbatch they did it all in one take. Benedict Cumberbatch was there
for months.
He waited there, and they restarted every single time, and they shot it in real time. So at night that actually happened. They had and it's just like. What do you want? Like, what? It's just like Robbie Collins, somebody who I think is I think he has a really great mind for cinema and he understands it really well. Is like on Twitter ranting about that and just like there's a clear cut to black at this point in the film. Like, and there's plenty of edits. I could point to you every single edit in the film.
They're not going to do the whole movie in one take.
Because I mean, cinematography is like my favorite aspect of films. And so like I watched this movie and I could literally point out if we sat down and watched it right now exactly where each edit is. Yeah. Who cares? It's not important. Each scene is shot in one take, not the whole movie. They never promised that. I just don't understand why people get so upset about that.
I just feel like it's like the advertisements the studios will just grab onto like one thing and kind of push that as like this is the whole thing. Instead it's like, oh, this is just one element of like a really complex and well-made movie.
For sure. Yeah, I mean ultimately, you just like I'm not a film critic. I mean, we do a podcast, but that's not the same thing. Like, I don't go to the screenings where they advertise for the film, which is because ultimately you get those pamphlets. I've heard that they hand out all these pamphlets of all the info that you're supposed to know about the movie, which I think is interesting and useful after the fact. But I hate that they do that. I hate the idea of going in with all kinds of. I mean, it can help you understand the movie, but I think every movie should be seen twice, for you to understand it.
Especially if it's your job.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess I get it, but it's good to have some context going in, I guess, if you're trying to maximize your understanding of a film the first time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it takes away from some of the surprise.
Yeah, it's
You know.
it's always best to go in fresh.
Because, I mean, that scene in the middle of this film when Blake dies is one of the most shocking scenes of the whole year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's up there with the Parasite reveal.
It's
you know.
really unexpected, but then
That's a spoiler. Sorry for anybody that hasn't seen Parasite. It's a spoiler, but it's not the key element of the film. So if anybody, we've already talked about spoilers on this podcast, I think, for Parasite, but still, I apologize for anybody that's mad about that, but whatever. Nobody's listening to this, so who cares?
I don't think we've revealed anything huge about Parasite.
Well, there's a lot of twists and turns in Parasite, but there's a pretty big reveal that I'm talking about, but that's one of many.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can spoil that film. It's too fucking good. I'm also very happy that it won the Oscars. We've had that conversation a couple times. But.
Are you aware of somebody's mom? I don't want to say who, but somebody who lives with me, their mom, saying it was a travesty.
That it won? Because it's foreign language?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I know exactly what you're talking about.
They have their foreign language award.
She hasn't even seen the film.
No.
That's
I don't think she's seen any of them. I don't think she's seen Joker, Parasite,
of course,
1917.
Yeah.
But she has some opinions about it.
Of course she does. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's ridiculous. I mean, I whatever.
I'm sure she's probably not the only person either.
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are angry about the fact. But the fact of the matter is, like, Parasite is the best film of the year.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
1917, though, is pretty damn close.
It is, but like,
but Parasite's such an achievement.
The focus is so much on the cinematography that Parasite as a whole is like gorgeous looking.
Yeah.
And the story is something new and strange and like really amazingly well written.
It's just masterful, And so is 1917, I think. But again, I just think like for a movie like Parasite to have the impact that it did, that's an achievement. And that's why it's the best film of the year.
And Bong Joon-ho is just such a great storyteller too.
Like people are talking about Parasite. That's why that award matters. It's not because, I mean, I know that Parasite is a political film, obviously, but it's not really. My brother and I were talking about that.
It's more
we can't get into that, like the spoilers on that today, but, on this episode at least. But we could do, if Carlos has seen it, we could bring you in we have 3 mics now, so we could do a podcast about Parasite. That'd be a good one if he hasn't seen it yet.
Would this be at 10 in the morning again?
We could usually, that's when we record.
Oh, God.
But we don't have to do it every Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning, though. We do it every Sunday, but that doesn't mean that you've got to be at every episode.
At 10 in the morning?
We'd love to have you, though. I mean, you've got good insight.
I mean, it would give me a reason to be here in this area to be able to go to Cinemark right after.
Yeah, that's true.
Is nice.
Check out a movie at noon or whatever.
I'm always too lazy to go.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, we'd love to have you. I mean, we've got the mic stand so that you could sit on the couch. And Carlos and I could. I want to get mic stands like this for all 3 of us, but it just is expensive. Because ultimately, I could twist the base off of these because we bought these because we were originally doing it at Carlos's kitchen table. Oh. It's just like this, like it's one that it's a desktop mic stand is what it is for those that are listening.
Like streamers and
it's great for that. It was great for a tabletop, but we don't have. And for those who don't know, we're like sitting sideways at desks, and talking. So, but Cody's got like a mic stand, so which holds the mic up, and you could literally sit anywhere in the room for that, because of that. So, but that's the ideal thing, and we could look into it, but we'll see. But we would love to have you every week if we could, obviously. But there's no expectation that would be a requirement, because we could do this format with anybody. That's the beauty of it. I think that's what I was excited about. That format is that it's just like I could watch a movie with Trey and I could go do a podcast about that movie.
Yeah.
And hopefully I can be a good enough host to help kind of guide through the conversation. But
I think Trey would be a fun addition. So if you ever have a podcast that's like you're recording like at a later time, I'm sure it'd be up for it, but he's worse than me. Like there's
about waking up at 10 o'clock.
You can't even get him out of bed. Like he's late to work. He was on the other day. He was like an hour and a half
That's right. I forget he works
he's
for you.
supposed to come in at 10, and he wasn't there till like 11:35.
He's talking shit about an employee on his podcast. It's hilarious. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, if Carlos isn't available, we can kind of do it whenever because I can record. I mean, as long as we just the hard thing for me is just getting all this equipment. Like, we need to do it at the office because it's just too much easier for us to do it.
The drive's not really that bad. It's only like
it's 20 minutes.
Yeah.
If we plan it around traffic, it'd be fine. But we could pretty much do it any afternoon or any evening or whatever. We could do an episode in the middle of the week, and then Carlos and I could do another episode on Sunday.
Yeah.
So it's not
whenever
like
we all have seen a movie.
because the setup for this takes 15 minutes. It's
Yeah.
and the mixing of it takes all of 20 minutes. So it's not a huge time commitment for something that I think is really enjoyable for myself at least. So.
Yeah.
In fact, the matter is, it's like I don't need to be involved in every episode too. It's not like
It definitely helps because you're able to like keep everything focused.
Oh, I've done this. We've been doing this this is our 39th episode. So I mean, at least that's one thing I think we're good at is at least. But we're not good at sticking to any kind of structure either. So
yeah.
But I think
It's
I can
better
help guide the
than
discussion.
when me and Trey did it on my Tascam, on my 8-track Tascam.
Doing podcasts isn't easy. It takes time.
And it's easy to lose focus. And also me and Trey would get in pretty big arguments, and Trey can get pretty heated.
Yeah,
I got
that's fair.
heated too, but
But that's the fun part about Trey. He's the wild card.
Yeah.
But we can ultimately like getting another mic costs all of $150.
Mm-hmm.
Like the business is talking about potentially doing a wedding podcast at some point. It's Jason's idea. We were talking about it before you got here. And so like there's a chance we might be able to get some business investment into the podcast rather than just doing it with my own money personally. So, because I can't afford another mic, but I would love to have 4. I don't think we need more than 4 people on the show at once.
we might have one of these lying around
We just need some mic stands, and because that's the biggest limitation is the mic stands, and they're expensive. Like this is $100 stand probably. So it's kind of a piece of shit, but
with those heavy basses, that's a lot of it because if you don't have the heavy bass, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, and this works, but I mean, if you extend that boom at all, it's going to fall over. Yeah. It's not that heavy, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
So it's like I think between all of us musician friends, we could probably come up with 4 mic stands that we could just leave in the office. And if you guys, it's just like Andy's interface, like. We can just leave it here. He works here every day. He can pick it up any day that he wants. That's what he was talking about. Because we could run all that stuff into the interface. And then I know that 3 people listening to this podcast are probably so fucking bored by now. And that's fair.
Right,
but I mean, ultimately, we're just trying to talk through like what we could do to improve the show. And and those that are listening, we would love to hear your thoughts as well. So I
listen to a film podcast where they get into these rants about this stuff, and I'm still
that's what
like
you enjoy.
enjoying it. Yeah,
exactly. And if you don't, you can skip through the conversation. Who cares? It's a podcast.
Yeah,
it's ours. Fuck you. We can do whatever we want. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I like the platform because you can basically bring anybody on as long as they've seen the movies that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And when you do 1 or 2 films, it's not as hard for them to like have to do homework to get caught up. If we just do one movie that we highlight and then we talk about the Oscars in a broad way, that's a 2-hour episode.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're moving to, and I'm excited about it because it's easier to do it every week, and then you could have like I don't know, like the discussions will be more interesting. Because it's not just myself and Carlos talking about the movies we want to talk about. It's like we can pick a film and it forces all of us to go watch it and analyze it. And that's an interesting kind of, I don't know. I've been working through that script that I told you about. And I've been kind of learning how scripts work. Mm-hmm. And like discussing film and watching film has helped kind of inform like how to write a script. And so that's why like this analysis and breakdown is like really interesting to me. Because it's like, I don't know. And so ultimately, that's kind of what we're moving to. But anyway, back to 1917. And we pretty much talked about everything. Cinematography was where we left off, though. Yeah. Which is that just everybody was whining and complaining about the fact that they were advertising that it was shot by Roger Deakins and it was shot in all one take, which I think is
Why would you not?
Why would you not want that?
Yeah.
If you love movies, like you should want that. But like I don't know, man. Like I think the way that he moves the camera. Now this is because Roger Deakins is one of the greatest professionals in the industry.
Yeah.
Is he knows how to move a camera all in one take and get a wide shot, a close up immediate.
Yeah.
Like he's following these actors and with these planned camera moves, and he's still getting all the things that you need. It's not boring at all. If anything, it's like completely riveting.
Yeah.
And it's entirely because of the way he moves that camera. Like that when they're running through the trenches, this is something I brought up when we talked about a couple weeks back, is they're running through these trenches, and the trenches are designed in a way that there's points where it breaks off. So and I'm showing Cody with my fingers, so it makes more sense to him maybe.
Yeah.
But like they split off in the left side, and the camera goes right around like a centerpiece, and the camera will move in front and then pick up with, so like the camera's falling behind up until that little break split point. And then they go left, camera goes right, camera moves in front, and all of a sudden now you're in a front-facing 2-shot. And so these soldiers are running, and it's just really impressive. Like, but that's just one of many different technical camera moves that, like, you if you watched the movie and you just looked at it from a cinematography perspective, it's unbelievable. Like the crane shots that when he goes across a river, you know, before he jumps in, like he's like, I think that's the scene where he's like walking step by step on top of this like really thin platform over water.
Yeah.
And the camera is like 2 feet away on a crane.
Yeah.
And it's in focus somehow. And you're like, it's unbelievable. Like, I can't believe that shot is stable. And it's like that took to boom that camera. I mean, those cameras are massive. To boom that over water and then like find a way to move it in a way that's like, it's just unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And that makes everything more exciting. Yeah.
I actually watched a behind the scenes video where they were talking about Deakins and how he was just like attached to the hip with Sam Mendes, and they were just always like right there. Like first one's there, last one's to leave.
Well, and they've worked together multiple times now.
Yeah.
So.
And they meld really well, and they would have to do this thing where like they could only do, like, they had to use the lighting for the most part just from natural lighting.
Interesting.
Because you would have so many of these shots it'd be like 360
you can't
shots
see a ton
where
of
you
stuff.
you'd see
everything.
Yeah, you'd see all the stuff going on behind the scene.
Because most of the film is kind of overcast.
Yeah, and they would have to wait, and they would just sit there and like rehearse the scenes, and as soon as somebody would be watching the overcast, they'd be like, okay, go, 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 go,
Wow.
go. And you'd have these shots where like either Deakins sometimes would be doing it, or like the camera operator with Deakins right next to him, they'd be like following them with a camera, and then there'd be like a car waiting, like a truck waiting, and they'd hop on, and then the truck would start driving.
Yeah.
And you'd see like, oh man.
And it's unbelievable.
The
And then you think like there's also audio involved in a lot of that stuff too. So some of those dialogue scenes where they're moving the camera around, you can't hear any of that extra stuff. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, there's a guy with a boom mic just like right next to the operator, like moving together in formation.
And it's like to accomplish that is an achievement.
Yeah.
And that's a directing thing too. That's Sam Mendes. I mean, this is really, and that's what the other thing I have written down as far as the craft goes, is this is an impeccably well written and well directed film, and Sam Mendes deserves a lot of credit for that, because think of just what you described as 3 specific parts. Those are 3 different departments on a film set. So like the audio, the boom mic operator, right? There's somebody also probably mixing that audio somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And you're coordinating all that stuff for when somebody says action. And it's like, that's a hard thing to do that people just don't understand. I don't understand what goes into directing a film, you know? It's unbelievable. And to get what we see on screen is also pretty damn impressive. Yeah. So anyway, I guess we move on to kind of the analysis portion of it, which is, and we've kind of identified what we think the movie's trying to say. That, you know, that it's war is essentially, sometimes it's pointless, you know, but that doesn't mean that there's not some positive aspects to it. And that, you know,
like lives that need to be saved.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
characters you can grow as a person because of war, which I guess isn't, I don't necessarily know that that's what it's trying to say, but I do think it's an element to it, you know.
There was definitely moments of contrast, like where, like 2 times I can remember distinctly where first one he's in the truck and he's had that moment to kind of like breathe in that nice moment with Mark Strong, who's like kind of like there for him and emotionally the one who's like sorry for him and like understanding what he's going through. And then right after he goes to the bridge thing, crossing, and then just thrown right into another firefight where he's like almost getting his head blown off.
Yeah.
And then the other time is with the girl and the baby. It's like he has this moment of like safety and like tenderness, and then as soon as he walks out, he has to like
He's
choke
just
some
back
guy, like
to-
break
yeah.
the windpipe of some like young
Jesus
German
Christ.
soldier
Yeah.
in the dark, like hiding from the other soldier. It's
And he
just-
doesn't want to. And
No.
it's very clear in that scene
Because
that
at
it's not what
first
he wanted to.
he could have just
It's by that
stabbed him.
campfire. Yeah. And
he
yeah.
could have stabbed him or slit his throat, but he like held his mouth because it's like he really didn't want to have to do it.
Sure. Yeah.
I think he was
it's crazy.
He was at the point where he
And that
didn't wanna
performance is
kill.
really fucking good too.
Yeah.
The lead, which his name is George Mackey,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, I mean, that's an outstanding performance. I don't know if he got nominated though for it. I should have.
I don't remember seeing.
He
his
says
name
so
on the
much with
list.
no words. Like
Yeah.
that performance is really
He's
impressive.
got a great face for acting. It's
He
like
does.
it's like strange but like endearing.
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
Like it grows on you.
Now, what specifically about the film relates to you personally? Is there anything? I don't have an answer for this either.
I would say in a like on a general level, like being there for your friends through like whatever happens.
Sure, regardless of it. Yeah,
And
just being selfless about it.
I've never had to deal with something on that level, but
course.
I hope that I would do something
Make the right decision in that
yeah,
circumstance.
for a friend. Yeah,
Yeah, that makes
And-
sense.
for family as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's just kind of that like, I think what like the main character kind of realizes is that fearlessness. You know, it doesn't mean that you should be stupid about it, and that's what his character knows that, right?
Yeah.
It's like you know, it's one thing to be it's confident and fearless. It's another thing to be stupid and irresponsible because you're. I think that's interesting though, that concept of this film, and especially after we've kind of broken that down.
Yeah.
That's something about it specifically that speaks to me. But
Which it's I like how you said that he is smart, even though he's like thrown into chaos. Because in any other war movie, in that scene with the flares in the
yeah, which is
in
an
the dark
unbelievable,
town,
incredible.
you would have a
sequence.
soldier like he literally drops his gun after he kills that guy. In any other movie, it would be like he has this huge firefight.
Sure.
But this Schofield just runs.
Yeah.
He just fucking runs through the town trying to dodge
Mm-hmm.
all the other soldiers because he's like, there's no way I can fight all these guys.
Yeah.
I just need to get the hell out of here. And
Yep.
he jumps in the river and almost drowns.
Kind of
but-
magically wakes up where he needs to be. But
Yeah.
that scene though is also just completely surreal and amazing, where
Yeah.
he wakes up and stumbles upon the troop, and it might be an enemy troop. He doesn't know, right?
Yeah,
and that's
but he
he doesn't even
He's so
care.
exhausted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing, really incredible scene also, and
Yeah.
a great piece of directional sound mixing as
Yeah.
well. Like you can hear it off in the distance, and then he
It almost
slowly
feels like a
gets closer
fairy
to it.
tale or something.
It's unbelievable, yeah. And
Yeah.
the way the camera's, I mean, it's kind of like he's dazed and he's coming out of a trance, like the way
Yeah.
it's shot. It's like, again, that's just a perfect pairing of concept and execution.
And the river scene too, where he's floating down, and the rapids have calmed down, and he's holding onto the log.
Yeah.
And then there's all those little like white flower petal
Yeah,
things
which
that
is
Blake
unbelievable.
had talked about before.
And it's all one shot too. It's
and
all
then
like
he just ends up in this pile of bodies that have collected
Oh, I
next
forgot
to
about
this
that.
branch, and he has to like crawl through this.
yeah, which is
dead
horrifying.
bodies,
Yeah, Jesus.
But the white petals remind me of Blake earlier, before, like literally right before he dies. They go through that orchard, and he's like, he knows what the trees and flowers are called, and he's like,
so it's an
they
actual
chopped them all
setup and
down,
payoff.
and he's like, so what, are these dead? And he's like, no, once the stumps rot, they'll grow back twice as large. So it's kind of like
Interesting.
I don't know exactly how to connect it to the overall story.
Well, I
but
think what that's interesting. It's a great thing that you brought up. I mean, ultimately, I think what that is he's. I think look at those two characters and the dynamics between the two of them, right? Like his kind of hopefulness, Blake's hopefulness is something that was Schofield. What's his name again? Schofield doesn't have at that point in the film. It's like this fearlessness essentially, but it's also in order to be fearless, you have to be hopeful, right? Those things are they pair with one another pretty well, and so like and Schofield sees it as a weakness because he sees it as like
being
this
dumb.
yeah, and he embraces that by the end of the film. So like these little details all add up to that essentially, because like when you write a script, you break down the characters based on their strengths and weaknesses, and like if a character's confident, like it's a good word for it, but you could also say he's hopeful, he's fearless, he's, you can start like
elaborate.
Exactly. And then you can start looking at your other characters, and if you're trying to create a dynamic between them, usually those if you have a lead character that's trying to learn something, you surround them with people that can teach them those lessons, and that's how a story arc occurs, right? Now, he may have had the story planned out and then just created these elements with those characters around it, right? You never know. He may have thought like the dynamic could have been that these two soldiers go off and one of them dies, right?
Yeah.
That may have been what the concept was, and then you work backwards from there. But it just depends on what you're what angle you're approaching the script from, or script stamp, or the characters from. But it's definitely interesting. So I think that's what that means, though, is that it's the hopeful concept that there's a lot of destruction and it's terrible, but it can come back.
Like the difference in how Schofield and Blake see this example of like destruction. And
that's
Blake's
how you inform your audience, ultimately, is through these examples and through the way these characters react informs the way that their perspective and the way they look at the world.
Yeah.
So,
and it's done in like a subtle way, too.
Exactly.
It's just another example of how fantastic this
if you're
film
paying
is.
attention to it, it's almost obvious.
Yeah.
But, that's something I totally missed because I was caught up in the action of the film.
Yeah.
But,
And it's just a little conversation they have right before, a plane crashes into the farm.
Which is an amazing sequence, too.
Yeah.
And then he just gets it's like it's like chaos, complete chaos, and it's unbelievable.
And in the moment of him trying to help this German pilot that they just saved from a burning plane.
Yep.
And then the German just like...
Yep. Oh, man. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And then he bleeds out, and you're just sitting here, it's like, is he dying?
Yeah.
He's dying.
And it's like, feels so much more real than like a guy getting just shot and going, ugh.
Yeah.
Like dying. It's like him, like, you see the blood like draining from his face.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think that's the last question I had. I think we could share our overall. We've shared our overall thoughts on the film. I think we both loved the thing.
Loved it.
Yeah, I think it's
fantastic.
I think it's an achievement.
I want to go see it again.
I would love to
still
see
in
it.
theaters, honestly.
Yeah. Well, that's it for that movie for the most part. I don't know unless you have anything else you want to share about it, but
no,
we're at 54 minutes, so we ended up talking for an hour.
Yeah, we've pretty much gone through everything, I think.
Yeah, so that's 1917. I'm trying to think how to close this thing out. I don't know when we'll do the next one, but ultimately, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I was glad that we got to record something this week. That was my goal. So hopefully we can do this stuff more often. It'd be
Definitely,
fun. Yeah. And for those that are listening, go subscribe and like on all the things, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever your choice of podcast listening is. Review the show on those platforms for us if you can, and leave us some notes about what you think. You can send us an email or send it through Facebook or whatever, like our Facebook page. Do all that shit and let us know what we can do to make the show better. And I guess that's it. So I'm Jeremy Knight. That's where Carlos would say I'm Carlos Hernandez.
I'm Cody Boyer.
There we go. And this is Indecisive Cinema. Thanks, guys.